Minister Mark Carney is speaking to EU leaders just a couple of hours from now after having a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron. CTV News' Annie Bergeron-Oliver is at the World Economic Forum. She's joining us this morning with the latest. And Annie, this was supposed to be about trade and broadening our relationships outside of the U.S. But how is the issue of Greenland weighing over the forum this week?
Hi, Anne-Marie. Well, the issue of Greenland is definitely becoming a focus here. And it all sort of does tie into this trade and tariffs and the economy that many people and many leaders want to be talking about here. But for sure, the U.S. president's visit and his threat of tariffs on 8 EU countries is really overshadowing a lot of these conversations. You look today, the prime minister had a meeting with Emmanuel Macron, a leader who is facing these Trump tariffs. We don't know exactly what those two talked about, but for sure that issue is likely to have come up. Even just yesterday, the prime minister spoke to the UK Prime Minister. And again, the tariffs came up as well, the two of them discussing the issue of Greenland and deciding in a joint readout to say that, yes, look, both Canada and England want to stand behind the people in Denmark and the people in Greenland. Now, this is all going to kind of culminate tomorrow when the U.S. president comes to the World Economic Forum. He does have a speech later in the day. And so it'll be really interesting to see how the dynamics change once the U.S. president does land here. But the topic of Greenland is coming up in a lot of speeches that we're hearing today. Ursula von der Leyen, for example, the head of the EU, saying it was a mistake to levy tariffs on these 8 EU nations. And she said that allies need to stand together to call out Donald Trump against what he's doing.
Yeah, this all comes as Canada right now is considering whether or not to send troops to Greenland. But as you mentioned, U.S. President Donald Trump arrives in Davos tomorrow. You mentioned it's factored into some speeches. How could that play into what Prime Minister Carney has to say today when he makes his address at 10:30 Eastern?
Well, that's a big speech that the prime minister has, and it's coming up very shortly. All we know so far is that the prime minister wants to talk about the New World Order, but we can kind of get a few hints and slivers about what he's going to talk about based on the conversations and the speeches that we've had with him over the last 7 days. He's talked a lot about the need to diversify Canada's trading partners, to move away from one great power, and this means the United States. He's actively changing the foreign policy in Canada to move away from the United States, and he's made no surprise that that is a plan he's most likely to talk about today, is why Canada needs to diversify its trading partners, why we need to strengthen our collaboration with other allies, get more business investment. This is expected to come up in his speech today. Again, he talks about this new world order. We haven't really got a lot of information from him about what that means, but essentially what he has said is that Canada can no longer really be reliant on one major trading partner. We need to find allies other places to strengthen our economy and to weather our storms better.
You know, when you think about Davos, it's this big conference, but, you know, if you break it down to an understandable terms, it's almost like a trade show where the countries show up and they're trying to sell why they are the best place to invest. Earlier, our finance minister spoke as part of a panel. They positioned Canada as a stable place to invest. What do we know about how Carney is planning to frame Canada as a destination for investment?
It's expected to be very similar to François-Philippe Champagne. As you said, they are trying to position Canada as a very stable, reliable, predictable place to invest. And this is the message that he gave to the Chinese government when they signed a new agreement with them. Same with the Qataris, where he was just yesterday. He's also been pitching it to business leaders. Today, for example, he met with JP Morgan Chase. And this is the same message. Canada is stable. It's reliable. We, can weather storms by having good industries. They talk a lot about Canada's strength in the energy sector, in artificial intelligence, in clean tech. These are areas that Canada is really trying to pitch itself to, essentially saying, look, we are close to the United States. We do have a strong reliance on them. But what Canada is really trying to highlight to business leaders and other nations is look where our fingers go. We have deals with so many other countries. We're involved in so many other groups, and that makes us stronger, because if one relationship isn't as strong, we have lots of other relationships with other countries, with other businesses that helps us weather the storm. So again, they're really trying to position Canada as a stable, predictable and reliable place to invest. Obviously, that's in big contrast to the United States right now, which is in turmoil. And, many people are moving away from the United States because they feel that the U.S. president is far too unpredictable, especially now that we're seeing him potentially levying tariffs on EU allies simply because they do not want him to take over or buy Greenland.
If you don't want to be my friend, I'm going to try and force you to be my friend. CTV News' Annie Bergeron-Oliver joining us from Davos this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.